The desert wind had a voice of its own, dry and restless, whispering through the rocks like it had secrets too old to tell. Cole McAllister rode beneath a burnt orange sky, the sun dropping low like a tired outlaw slipping out of sight. 10 years, 10 damn years since he left this road behind. 10 years of drifting, fighting, running, and never once looking back. Now he was headed straight into the mouth of the place that nearly killed him. Deadman's Gulch. His horse. Ash snorted at the scent of smoke from a distant chimney. Civilization, if you could call it that. Cole shifted in the saddle, the worn leather creaking under his weight. A deep scar cut across his right knuckle, a memory of a life he'd tried to forget. A gunfight in Amarillo. Or was it Cheyenne? Hell, they all blurred together after a while. "Easy now, girl," he muttered to Ash. "Almost there." The town sat nestled between two jagged ridges, like a wound scabbed over, but never healed. Same crooked rooftops. Same leaning church steeple. Same saloon that once echoed with poker chips and gunshots. But this wasn't a homecoming. This was a reckoning. As he crested the ridge, he paused. Deadman's Gulch spread out before him like a painting faded by time. The buildings looked older, sadder, like they'd been holding their breath since the day he left. He pulled a crumpled letter from his coat pocket. The ink had faded, but the words were burned into his memory. "Don't come back here, Cole. They'll hang you on sight." It was from Abigail Crow, the sheriff's widow. She'd sent it a year after he vanished. He hadn't replied. He couldn't. Not then. Things were different. He wasn't here to clear his name. He was here to tell the truth, whether they believed it or not. "You're a fool, Cole," he said aloud. "But if you die honest." He nudged Ash forward. The trail narrowed as they descended into town, hooves crunching gravel. Like the slow tick of a noose tightening, no one welcomed him. No one waved, but they watched, through cracked windows, from behind curtains, from porches where rocking chairs had stopped rocking. The first person to step into the street was a boy. Maybe 8, maybe 9. Wide-eyed and barefoot, holding a wooden revolver in his small hand. He aimed it at Cole, squinting. "Bang!" the boy shouted. Cole gave a tired smile. "You got me, kid," he said, lifting his hands in mock surrender. The boy giggled and ran off. Somewhere in the shadows, his mother called after him, sharp and scared. Cole kept riding. He tied Ash outside the old church. The bell tower was cracked, vines creeping up like even the weeds were trying to forget what had happened here. He stepped inside. Dust motes floated in the stillness like ghosts. Cole knelt at the front pew, hat in his hands. His voice was low, almost too soft to hear. "I ain't here to ask forgiveness. I'm here to finish what I ran from." He stood, placed a single silver coin on the altar, and turned to leave. Outside, boots crunched the gravel behind him. He knew the rhythm of that walk. Hadn't heard it in 10 years, but he knew. Jackson Crow, the deputy. The brother of the man everyone said Cole McAllister had killed. Jackson Crow stood with his boots planted in the dust, one hand resting casually near the grip of his Colt. The badge on his chest caught the last flicker of sunlight, though it looked more like a burden than a symbol of law. He was leaner than Cole remembered, older too, a harder edge to his jaw. But the eyes? Still the same piercing, glacier blue that had once looked up to Cole like a big brother. Now those eyes looked at him like a snake coiled in the grass. "Didn't think you'd have the guts to come back," Jackson said. Cole adjusted his hat. He didn't reach for his weapon. He didn't blink. "Wasn't about guts," he said. "It was about timing. And the truth." Jackson took a slow step forward. "Truth don't matter much when there's blood in the dirt. You remember that, Cole? Every damn day." The air between them stretched tight, like rawhide in the sun. Two men, one past and no room for lies. Behind them, the town held its breath. Jackson had been just 16 when the sheriff was gunned down in front of the saloon. They called it a drunken argument, said Cole Drew first. The trial never came, because Cole vanished before the dust. Settled. No lawman, no testimony, just silence. That silence had festered in Jackson like a slow rot. He'd joined the marshal's office young, earned his badge quick, and wore it like armor ever since. And now here was Cole McAllister, back from wherever outlaws went to rot, standing as if nothing had happened. "You should ride out, Cole," Jackson said coldly. "Ain't nothing here for you but a grave. I'm not leaving, not this time." "Then you better be ready to die." Before we jump back in, make sure you subscribe. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special just for you. Another story, another secret, and maybe a whisper you weren't meant to hear. Cole didn't answer. He walked past Jackson without another word, heading toward the one place in town that still served both whiskey and bad memories, the saloon. The townsfolk watched from porches and windows, whispering like buzzards. Circling. Inside, the saloon smelled like stale beer, gun oil, and fear. The same piano stood in the corner, though its ivory keys were now yellowed with age. A card game froze mid-hand. 3 men sat silent, eyes darting to their hips. The barkeep, Saul Jenkins, looked up from polishing a cloudy glass. His mustache was grayer, but his scowl hadn't aged a day. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Didn't think I'd see your ugly mug again, McAllister. Just came for a drink," Cole said. "And I suppose we're all gonna pretend the last 10 years didn't happen." Saul barked. "You killed the sheriff." Left. Jackson with nothing. "You ain't getting no drink from me." Cole reached into his pocket, not for a gun, but for a coin. He placed it on the bar, a silver dollar. "I came to set things right, Saul, not to make more trouble. You are trouble." Jackson stepped into the saloon just as Cole lifted the glass to his lips. The deputy's hand was twitching now, not from fear, but from a fire long tended. "We settle this," he said. "You, me, high noon. You sure that's what you want?" "What I want is my brother back." "What?" "I'll settle for, is your blood in the dirt where he fell." Cole set the glass down. It clinked gently, the loudest sound in the room. "Then you'll get what you came for. Noon it is." The saloon emptied quick after that. Folks knew the signs. Gunfights weren't rare in Deadman's Gulch, but this one had the weight of a funeral. Outside, the sun slipped down, casting long shadows over the town. Cole leaned on the hitching post and looked up at the sky, darkening with the weight of things that couldn't be undone. "Reckon I'm gonna die tomorrow," he said softly. From behind him came a voice, gravelly and familiar. "Maybe, but at least you came back, son." Cole turned. An old man with a preacher's collar stood by the edge of the church, eyes sunken but kind. "Ain't many men get a second chance," the preacher said. "Don't waste yours on vengeance." "Ain't looking for vengeance," Cole said. "Just truth." The preacher nodded once, then turned and walked away. Into the night. Night fell hard over Deadman's Gulch, the kind of darkness that didn't just hide the town, it swallowed it whole. The kind that stirred up memories no one wanted to remember. The saloon lights glowed like fireflies trapped in a bottle. Cole sat alone at a corner table, drink untouched, his eyes locked on the swinging doors like he was expecting someone or something to come through. Truth was, he was. The room had changed in 10 years, but not enough. The poker tables were older, more worn. The mirror behind the bar was cracked in the top corner, and Saul's bald spot had grown into a full shine, but the ghosts were all in the same places. He could see the sheriff's body on the floor like it happened yesterday. Blood pooling near the spittoon. Jackson screaming, someone shouting, "McAllister, what the hell did you do?" He remembered the panic. The gun still hot in his hand, the crowd closing in, and most of all, He remembered the man who'd whispered in his ear just before he ran. "You take the fall, Cole, or we both die." Eli Torrance. Back then, just a gambler with a silver tongue and an eye for trouble. Now, word was, he ran half the land west of the ridge. A respectable man, with ranch hands who carried more iron than cattle. Cole stared into the amber swirl of his whiskey. "You ever think about what you did, Eli?" He whispered. "I've been dying every day since." The saloon doors creaked. Everyone looked up. Instinct, maybe. But it wasn't Torrance. It was Abigail Crow. She stepped in slow, the kind of quiet entrance that carried more weight than a dozen gunmen bustin' in. Her long black coat flowed behind her like a mourning veil, though her eyes were fire. She hadn't aged the way grief usually did to a person. She'd hardened. Not wrinkled or broken, sharpened. Every man in the saloon stood or lowered their eyes out of respect. All except Cole. He stood, hat in hand. "Abigail, you look like hell," she said. "But I reckon you already know that. I deserve worse." She crossed her arms. "Then why come back? To tell the truth. Now?" she scoffed. 10 years too late." "I know," he said quietly, "but I had to run then. You know what Torrance said to me that night? You should have stayed and fought. I'd be buried next to your husband if I had." Abigail looked him over like she was deciding whether to spit or cry. She did neither. "Jackson's gonna kill you tomorrow," she said. "Maybe he should." She stepped closer, her voice a whisper now. "You tell him the truth before he does. Before you bleed out in that street like my husband did. He won't believe me. He don't have to. I will." She turned and walked out, the doors swinging behind her like the final page of a chapter that refused to stay shut. Cole sat back down, heart pounding in a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. Not since the war, not since the night the sheriff fell. "You all right?" Saul asked from behind the bar, his gruff tone masking something close to sympathy. "No," Cole replied. "But I'm here." One by one, the patrons filtered out, leaving only Cole, Saul, and the last dregs of a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Saul poured another drink and slid it across the bar. "On the house," he said. "If you're gonna die tomorrow, might as well have a good whiskey tonight." Cole lifted the glass. "To the truth." He drank it down slow. Outside, the wind howled through the dusty alleys like a warning. And in the dark corners of the saloon, the ghosts of the past stirred in their shadows, waiting for morning. Dawn hadn't broken yet when Cole walked the worn path out past the edge of town. The stars above Deadman's Gulch hung like distant eyes, watchful and cold. Each step he took kicked up dust that clung to his boots like regret. In the stillness of the hour, even the coyotes stayed silent. He passed the chapel, the same old bones of a building he'd sat in as a boy, fidgeting while his father muttered prayers with shaking hands. But he didn't stop there. He kept walking. To the graveyard on the hill, the wooden gate creaked open on rusted hinges. Time had not been kind to the cemetery. Weeds had grown tall. Headstones leaned like old men with tired backs. He found the grave easily. 4th row. 3rd marker. Samuel McAllister, a man can be lost and still be loved. 1825 to 1867. Cole stood there for a long time, hat in hand, until the wind began to tug at his coat like an impatient child. "I never made things right with you, Pa," he whispered. "You warned me, told me not to trust men like Torrance, told me to stay out of that saloon, but I didn't listen. And look what it got me." He knelt in the dirt. "You were a hard man, but I know now. You were trying to save me, in your own way." He pulled a small leather pouch from his coat. Inside was his father's pocket watch, broken, its hands forever stuck at 6:17. "It stopped the day you died," Cole murmured. "And I guess part of me did too." He placed it gently on the grave, next to a flat stone he'd carved as A boy. In his mind, he could still hear his father's voice. Your name's all you got in this world, boy. Protect it like it's gold. One day, it'll be all you leave behind. But what did the name McAllister mean now to the town? A murderer to Jackson? A coward to himself? A question he hadn't answered in 10 long years. The wind picked up. Distant church bells tolled. It was almost morning. Cole stood and turned toward the ridge that overlooked the town. The town that had cast him out. That had burned his image into every child's bedtime threat. Behave, or you'll end up like McAllister. But maybe, just maybe, the sane town deserved to hear the truth, even if it came with a bullet. Someone else was coming up the trail. Cole heard the step before he saw the shadow. A tall, thin figure in a worn black coat, leaning on a cane more out of style than necessity. The preacher. Reverend Josiah Brand. Eyes like soft coals, and a voice like slow thunder. Thought I might find you here, he said. Couldn't sleep, Cole replied. Most men don't, night before they die. Cole gave a dry laugh. Is that why you're here? To give me a sermon? I already did that. You were 12. You fell asleep halfway through it. Cole chuckled again, and for a brief moment, the past didn't seem so heavy. The Reverend moved beside him and looked down at Samuel's grave. He was a hard man, but he loved you. Funny way of showing it. Some men ain't built for gentle. The two stood in silence. Finally Cole spoke. I need to. No. If I die tomorrow, does any of this matter? Josiah looked at him, eyes deep and steady. If you die trying to make it right, that's more than most men ever do. Even if the truth dies with me, truth's got a way of lingering. Like the wind out here, never seen but always felt. The sun began to rise, a thin orange line stretching across the east. Another day had come. Cole turned to leave, but paused. Thanks, Reverend. Don't thank me, son. Thank yourself. For not running this time. Cole walked back toward the town, toward the duel, toward the man who might kill him. And behind him, the preacher knelt at Samuel McAllister's grave and whispered a quiet prayer. Not for the dead, but for the living who still had something to prove. Back in his room above the livery stable, Cole lit the oil lamp and sat down at the writing desk. The room was bare, save for a cot, a wash basin, and an old mirror that didn't bother hiding the lines on his face. He pulled out a folded piece of parchment, creased and yellowing, and laid it flat on the desk. A fresh page sat beside it. The ink in his pen had dried twice already, but this time he was ready to write. Jackson, if you're readin' this, I'm either dead or too gut shot to explain what really happened that night, 10 years ago. I don't expect forgiveness. I sure as hell don't deserve it. But you got a right to know the truth before you draw down on me tomorrow. Cole stared at the page. The next words were harder. His hand trembled, not from fear, from memory. Flashback, 10 years earlier. It was late, and the saloon was quiet except for the sound of boots scraping against the floor. The sheriff, Isaac Crow, stood near the bar, arguing low and tense with Eli Torrance. Cole had only come in for a drink, but the second he heard Torrance hiss, "You don't know who you're messin' with, old man," he knew it would turn bad. Isaac went for his gun. And that's when it happened. A shot, but not from Cole's weapon. Torrance fired first, quick and dirty, through the gut. The sheriff collapsed. Cole stood stunned, too slow to stop it. He drew, but Torrance had already turned to him, eyes cold. "You want to die here, or run?" Torrance had said. "You're the one holding the gun now. They'll believe what I tell them." Cole remembered his boots sliding through blood as he backed away. The door flung open, Jackson screaming his brother's name. Then nothing but dust and silence for a decade. I ran, Jackson. Not because I was guilty, but because Torrance held all the cards. He said if I opened my mouth, he'd kill Abigail. Said he had men in this town who'd slit her throat before I could finish a sentence. So I ran. I lived like a coward. Hated myself for it every damn day. But the truth is, your brother died a hero, and I let the wrong man become a king. Eli Torrance shot Isaac. I saw it. I know it. And if I die tomorrow, at least I'll die trying to set it right. Cole signed his name at the bottom and folded the letter with care. He walked it down to the general store and handed it off to the old mail clerk, who raised an eyebrow. "Deliver this to Deputy Crow," Cole said. "Tomorrow. Noon sharp. Whether I walk out of that duel or not." The clerk nodded, sensing not to ask questions. As he stepped outside, the sun was rising again, streaks of light painting the town gold. As if heaven itself wanted to see what would happen next. Cole stood there for a long time, watching the light spill across the buildings, wondering if maybe, just maybe, this town would remember something different about him when the dust finally settled. Not the outlaw, not the killer, but the man who came back to tell the truth. The church bells rang just after sunrise, soft and mournful. Cole heard them from the boardwalk outside the stable, where he was tightening his saddle straps. Ash shifted her weight, sensing the tension in her rider's bones. The duel was only hours away, but Cole had one more person to face before then. He found Abigail Crow outside her late husband's home, sweeping the porch like she had every morning since Isaac was buried. The house stood quiet at the edge of town, paint peeling, shutters sagging, not from neglect, but from the weight of memory. She didn't look up when Cole approached. "You're up early," she said flatly. "Didn't sleep." "Can't say I'm surprised." He took off his hat and held it against his chest. "I wrote him a letter," Cole said. "Told him everything. About Torrance, about that night." "He won't believe it," she said without pausing. "Not from you. I know. That's why I left it with the clerk. He'll read it whether I'm breathin' or bleedin'." Abigail stopped sweeping. Slowly she turned to face him. Her eyes, sharp as flint, bored into his. "I lost my husband that night, but I lost Jackson too. You might have run, but he stayed, and the hate festered. Every badge he earned, every outlaw he dragged in, it was for Isaac, and for revenge. I didn't mean to ruin him," Cole said. "But you did. I'm trying to fix that." "Then why face him in the street like some outlaw ghost?" She snapped. "Why not drag Torrance out into the light and let the town see him for what he is?" Cole's silence was answer enough. "He owns half the land, has half the town in his pocket. Nobody'll stand up to him," he said. "But if I die telling the truth, maybe somebody will." Abigail stepped off the porch and walked toward him, close enough that her voice dropped to a whisper. "You think dying makes you noble, makes you forgiven?" Her voice cracked now. "You think I want to watch another man I care about die in front of me? I ain't a skin for forgiveness." "No," she said bitterly. "You're a skin for a legacy." Cole lowered his eyes. "I don't know what I'm a skin for. I just know I can't run anymore." The silence stretched between them. Then Abigail reached into the folds of her coat and pulled out a small leather bundle. She pressed it into Cole's hand. "This belonged to Isaac," she said. "His badge, his journal. He wrote in it every day, even the day he died." Cole opened it slowly. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, recounting arrests, prayers, hopes for the town, and fears. On the final page, dated the day he died, was this: "Eli Torrance's men are sniffing around the saloon again. I don't trust that. Snake, if something happens to me, I hope Abigail and Jackson remember I tried to protect this place." Cole's throat tightened. "This is what I needed." "Then use it," she said. "Don't just die for the truth. Fight for it." Abigail turned and walked back up the porch steps. She didn't look back. Cole stood there for a long time, turning the badge over in his hands. It was worn, bent, but it still shined in the light, like something worth remembering. Cole knelt before Isaac Crow's grave. The headstone had been polished recently. A single white lily lay beside it. He placed the badge and journal on the stone. "You didn't die for nothing, Isaac," he whispered. "You just didn't get the ending you deserved." He stood and looked toward the town, toward Torrance, toward the Duel. As Cole walked back down the hill, one thing was clear. He might die today, but he wouldn't die with the truth still buried. Jackson Crow sat at his brother's desk in the sheriff's old office, the same desk where Isaac once kept a loaded pistol in the bottom drawer and a Bible in the top. It was still there. Both of them. He'd opened neither in years. The badge on his chest felt heavier than usual, as if it knew what today meant, what it would cost. The streets outside were quiet, but not in the peaceful sort of way. It was the hush of a town that knew blood was about to be spilled. And no one, not one soul, could say for certain who'd walk away from it. Jackson poured himself a drink, even though he hadn't touched whiskey in years. Not since the night Cole McAllister ran. His hand trembled as he raised the glass. Rage could steady a man's aim, but it didn't do much for his nerves. "You're finally back, Cole. After 10 years of silence, 10 years of questions, 10 years of me thinking maybe I should have chased you down myself and dragged you back. In chains, but now you just waltz in, looking like a ghost that forgot how to die." He stared at the pistol on the desk. "Cleaned, oiled, loaded. You want to talk about truth, but you left. You left me to bury him. To watch Ma die with hate in her heart. To carry the name Crow like it was a weight instead of an honor. Now you want to tell me it wasn't you." He closed his eyes and saw Isaac's face, not the lawman, but the brother who'd taught him how to ride, how to throw a punch, how to do right by people. That man had been left in the dirt while Cole rode off into legend. There was a knock. At the door, Jackson tensed. "Come in." A wiry, nervous-looking clerk stepped inside, hat in hand. Deputy, a letter. From Cole McAllister. Said to give it to you, noon sharp." "But I figured." Jackson snatched the envelope and dismissed him without a word. He sat back down, unfolded the letter, read it once, then again, then sat in stunned silence. Isaac hadn't died in a drunken argument. Cole hadn't drawn first. It was Torrance. Torrance, the same man who now controlled half the ranches, who donated to the church, who bought respect with fear and silence. And Cole? He'd been protecting Abigail, sacrificing his name to shield her from the same fate. Jackson's throat was dry. His hand clenched the letter so tight the paper creased. 10 years, he whispered. All this time, he felt sick. Not just at the lie, but at what it had turned him into. He'd built his life around a wound, one that festered into purpose, into vengeance. And now? Now he didn't know who he was without it. A knock came again. This time it was Abigail. Her face was pale, jaw set. She didn't wait for permission. She stepped inside, eyes finding the crumpled letter on the desk. "So, you read it?" Jackson nodded slowly. "It true?" "I believe it is," she said. "And you know it is too. You always did. You just needed someone to hate." He didn't answer. She walked to the desk and dropped something in front of him, a worn leather journal and a tarnished badge. "Isaac's, page 76, she said, and turned to leave. He flipped to the page, read the words his brother had written. "Torrance is pressing again. I'm getting real uneasy about his boys in town. If something happens to me..." Jackson's hand shook, and for the first time in 10 years, he wept out when the tears dried. He strapped on his holster, not for vengeance, not for justice, but for truth. Whether or not he pulled the trigger, that decision would come in the street. But if he faced Cole now, it would be as a man, not as a boy screaming over his brother's blood. The Black Ridge Ranch stood like a fortress on the outskirts of Deadman's Gulch, all sharp fences, watchful eyes, and cold wind. It was the kind of place where power didn't ask permission, it just took. Cole McAllister rode in slow. Every ranch hand on the property paused their work. Some leaned on shovels. Some reached for rifles. No one smiled. And none of them stopped. Him, they knew who he was. More importantly, they knew who he was here to see. The front porch of the ranch house was wide, freshly painted, and far too proud for a man like Eli Torrance. And there he sat, polished boots up on the rail, whiskey in one hand, cigar in the other, clean-shaven, calm-eyed, dressed like a gentleman. And dangerous as a rattler in tall grass, he didn't stand, didn't blink, didn't need to. Well, hell, Eli said with a grin. If it ain't the ghost of Deadman's Gulch. Cole dismounted without a word, dust rising off his coat, like smoke from a dying fire. Been waiting on you, Torrance added, puffing on his cigar. Figured the guilt'd drag you back sooner or later. Cole didn't smile. You've got a talent, Eli. Always knew how to rot a town from the inside out. Now. Eli said smoothly. I didn't rot it, I just pruned it. Cleared out the weak. Made room for a little law and order. You mean fear. Same thing, if you do it right. Cole stepped closer, boots thudding on the wooden steps. Jackson knows. About what? Eli grinned wider. Your love letter? Please, that boy's too tangled up in grief to see daylight. You're wrong. He's read Isaac's journal. He knows it was you who pulled the trigger. Torrance's grin faltered, just for a flicker. You really think that changes anything? It might, Cole said, hand resting on his belt. If it don't, I'll make sure it does. The moment stretched thin. Torrance stood, flicking ash from his cigar onto the porch. You're a fool, McAllister. You think they'll rally behind you? They've been drinking my whiskey and talking my coin for years. They've also been burying their sons. Buried too many names that ended up on your payroll. Torrance's smile vanished. You show up here thinking you're a savior, a martyr. You ran. I stayed. I built something. You built it on lies. Cole snapped. And what's truth gotten you? Torrance sneered. 10 years of dust and guilt and runnin'? You want to die in the street for honor? Go ahead. The undertaker's already cleaned a box for you. I won't be the one needing it. A long silence. Wind rustled the porch. Torrance narrowed. His eyes. You really gonna go through with this duel? Unless you'd rather settle it right now. Torrance's hand twitched. But only slightly. He wasn't a street fighter, not unless the odds were rigged. He leaned back. No, let the boy have his moment. It won't change what happens next. Cole turned to leave. You're right, Eli, he said without looking back. It won't change what happens next. It'll start it. Cole rode slowly down Main Street. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across every storefront. The townsfolk felt it in their bones. A storm was coming. Not the kind you run from, the kind you stand in. As Cole passed the saloon, a group of men turned away. Not in fear. In shame. Something in the wind had shifted. The story they'd been told was cracking, and what lay underneath was beginning to glow like iron in a forge. The name Eli Torrance was starting to mean something different now. Not wealth, not power, rot. 10 years earlier. Deadman's Gulch was quieter, leaner, but not yet sick with rot. The saloon still smelled of sawdust and cheap tobacco. The church bell still rang every Sunday, and folks still believed the law could keep the dark at bay. Isaac Crow was the man who made them believe it. Sheriff, husband, brother, and the only thing standing between this town and the man who would one day own it. It was near midnight when Isaac stepped into the saloon that night. He wasn't wearing his badge, but everyone in the room knew who he was. Cole was already at the bar, nursing a shot of rye and trying not to think too hard. Abigail was homesick, And Isaac had asked Cole to keep an eye out for Torrance, who had a habit of showing up after dark, smooth-talking the drunks and setting traps with gold coins and honeyed lies. Torrance was there all right. Seated at a poker table near the back, flanked by 2 hired guns with eyes like snakes and no names anyone could remember. He was smiling, always smiling, until Isaac stepped in. "Isaac, Eli, you and me need a word." "Torrance, evening, Sheriff. You want a seat at the table?" "Isaac, I want you to stop sniffing around this town like it's yours." "To buy." Torrance, still grinning. "Now that's just unfriendly. I'm here for cards, not conquest." "Isaac, you're here for control, but it ain't yours to take." The saloon went still. A man in the corner stopped shuffling his cards. The piano player froze mid-note. Cole watched, half hoping the tension would break like a bluff, hard but harmless. It didn't. Torrance stood up slowly. One of his men shifted, just a hand on a holster, not drawn, not yet. Cole caught it in the mirror behind the bar. "Isaac, I know about the threats. The land grabs, the bribes. Torrance, you know nothing you can prove." "Isaac, then maybe it's time I tried." That was it, the moment. Torrance reached under his coat, fast and low. Isaac saw it too late. The flash lit the saloon like lightning, a single shot. Muffled by shouts, by disbelief. Isaac staggered backward, blood blooming from his side like a rose. Cole drew, but Torrance's man was already on him, tackling him sideways into a table. His gun clattered away. Chairs crashed. Bottles shattered. And in the chaos, Torrance slipped out the back, unmarked, unnamed dot by the time Cole found his footing. Isaac was gasping on the floor, hand pressed to his gut, eyes wide with betrayal. Jackson burst in seconds later, eyes landing first on his dying brother. Then on Cole. There was no explaining. No breath left to speak. The scene told its own story, and the town believed it. "Cole, hang on, Isaac. Help's coming. Don't you quit now." Isaac, weak, bloodied. "Torrance." "It was him. Cole. I'll find him. I swear." Isaac, grabbing Cole's arm. "Protect her. Protect Abigail." Those were his last words, and Cole never got to repeat them. Because just then, the townsfolk started pouring in. And Torrance's whisper campaign was already underway. He pulled the trigger. They argued over cards. McAllister lost control. The narrative formed like smoke, and Cole ran. Not because he was guilty, but because staying meant death, and worse, it meant Abigail might die too. Torrance had already proven what he was capable of. Back in the present, the sky above Deadman's Gulch darkened with the coming dusk. The saloon stood unchanged, as if time itself hadn't dared move the scene of the crime. But the truth? The truth had just been told. History is written by the loudest man in the room. For 10 years, that man had been Torrance. But now the quiet voices were stirring. The memories once buried beneath silence and fear had started to rise. The town didn't know it yet. But tomorrow morning, the reckoning would come. And Deadman's Gulch would finally remember who killed its sheriff. The sun stood straight overhead, a burning eye watching over Deadman's Gulch. The air was dry as gunpowder. Noon. The town gathered in silence, lining the boardwalks, clustering. At windows, peering through curtains, as if that thin pane of glass could protect them from the truth, about to spill out into the dirt. Children clutched mothers' skirts. Old men pressed their hats to their chests. Shopkeepers closed their ledgers and stood with arms folded. This wasn't just a duel. It was Judgment Day. Cole McAllister stood at one end of the street. Dust gathered around his boots. His coat hung loose, but not careless. His eyes were calm, far too calm for a man who might not see sundown. His holster was low, tied tight around his thigh. His fingers hung loose at his sides, twitching only slightly, not with fear, but memory. Across from him, Jackson Crow stepped into the light. The two men stared at each other for what felt like years. 10 years to be exact. Cole, you. Read the letter. Jackson, nodding. I did. Cole, and? Jackson, it don't change what happened. He's still dead. I still buried him. Cole, and I still see it every time I close my eyes. A long silence. Then Jackson. Step forward. Draw, Cole. Let's end this. But Cole didn't move. Instead, he pulled something from his coat and tossed it into the dirt between them. The sheriff's badge. Isaac's. It landed with a dull thunk, catching the sun like a mirror to the past. He died wearing that, Cole said. And he died trying to stop a man we both let live too long. You ran, Jackson snapped. I ran to protect Abigail. To keep Torrance from finishing what he started. And now you want me to forgive you? No, Cole said. I want you to help me finish it. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. A challenge had just become a question. And Jackson? He looked down at the badge in the dirt, then up at Torrance, standing at the far end of the street, arms crossed, surrounded by 3 hired guns. Watching like a man certain he couldn't lose Doc Jackson, quietly. You really think Torrance killed him? Cole, I know he did. And so do you. Deep down, you've always known. Another long pause. The crowd didn't breathe. Jackson's hand hovered near his holster, but not over the grip. Instead, he reached down and picked up the badge. Then we finish this together, Jackson said. For Isaac, for Ma, for the town. Cole nodded once. And just like that, 2 men who came to kill each other turned together to face the real enemy. Torrance's smile dropped. Well, ain't this poetic, he muttered. He snapped his fingers. His men reached for their guns. Jackson moved first. Clean, fast, precise. 1 shot, 1 man down. Cole spun, ducked low, drew, and fired twice. The second thug dropped to the street, groaning. The third managed to squeeze off a shot. It grazed Jackson's shoulder, spinning him sideways, but Cole stepped in front of him and dropped the shooter with a single bullet to the chest. The street exploded with panic. People ducked, screamed, ran, but Torrance? He stood frozen. Cole walked toward him, gun still smoking. Torrance, you got no proof. Jackson limped beside Cole, blood staining his sleeve. Jackson, I've got a journal. I've got witnesses. I've got your own damn men, and I've got his letter. He held up the folded note. All signed and sealed. Cole, and now I've got you standing in the open. No shadows left to hide in. Torrance reached for his coat, maybe for a weapon, maybe for a lie. Didn't matter. Jackson shot him in the leg. Torrance dropped, like a stone, howling in pain. Cole stepped over him and knelt down. That was for Isaac, he whispered, then stood. The dust began to settle. The townsfolk emerged slowly, eyes wide. The myth of Torrance had been shattered. The truth had spoken in gunfire, in blood, in courage. Abigail rushed from the crowd, eyes locked on Jackson. You're hurt. It'll heal, he said. She turned to Cole. So will this town. For the first time in a decade, Cole McAllister holstered his weapon and didn't feel the weight of guilt. The legend of the outlaw had ended. In its place stood something rarer. A man who'd come back. Not to kill, but to redeem. Before I drop part 2, I want to know who's still ridden with us. If you want the rest of the story, drop a heart in the comment section. Once we hit 20 hearts, part 2 goes live. Let's finish this tale together.